Today, I want to talk about the world's largest hopped mead experiment and what I learned running it. So let's get started. So if you're a fan of my channel, you know I like to do big tests. I like to do videos that are going to hopefully be good reference points for people in the future as they make mead. Specifically, I noticed that hopped mead was had a couple videos on it on the internet, but nothing big. So I decided, and I put together this large experiment to figure out what the best hopped mead is, or what the best hop for mead is overall. What I quickly found was that it's a little bit situational. However, I wanted to go ahead and put together a giant test. So what I did is I found 40 different hops that I could use for mead. So what I did was I designed this experiment to test how each hop would pair with a basic mead. I did not want to do this in a way that was mixing hops. I wanted them to be single hops, so that's what you're gonna see today. I made 40 half gallons of mead in this experiment, and I will run you down a list of all the hops I used. This is only scratching the surface of all of the hops and the varietals of hops there are in the world. And towards the end of this video, I've got just like a little bit of information about each one of those hops you'll see. So if you're interested in that, that'll be at the end of this video. But 40 different hops. I went to my local homebrew store and literally just opened their hop container and just grabbed one of each. There are hundreds of varieties. So if I missed yours, that's your favorite, sorry, but that's just what I did. So for this test, after buying all 40 of my hops, 1 ounce bags, I should say, I went ahead and bought 4 steel pots because I ran 4 burners as I was boiling these hops. Now, one little important bit of information, as you see the information on the screen for each hop, you'll see a character profile that the hop is supposed to give off. For example, crystal hops give off a woody aroma, floral, and spicy. That's kind of the flavor profile. Most of the time, you'll get that whenever you do a dry hop, meaning that there is no isomerization of the hops via boiling, which is something that I did do in this. So there's no bittering element with that. That is the flavor from a dry hop. Now, there is an alpha acid component, and that is how bitter those hops are going to be. The higher the number, the more bitter that brew is going to be. And normally there's a range for these hops. So back to those crystal hops, we had our woody, aroma, floral, and spicy, and it is a 4 to 6% alpha acid, so it's less bitter. Something like a galaxy hop, which is 13 to 18.5% alpha acids, is gonna be a little bit more bitter after the boil. So for this experiment, I took 4 pots, took all of my hops. I bought a bunch of timers for this as well. I bought a bunch of honey. I also so happen to have 40 different glass carboys because I do a lot of these tests. So I had all of that stuff. I went ahead and boiled a half gallon of water, and I added 1/8 of an ounce of each hop to 1 pot. Now this was a bit of a mess to keep organized, so I used timers to help me with my timing, and of course the pots and things. So I would start a timer, I would throw the hops in when the water got to a boil, and they would boil for 15 minutes. I picked that time because I wanted to get a little bit of a bitter charge with these specific hops. I did not weigh these out alpha acid wise for them to all hit the same point. And I know some people are gonna say, well, this test doesn't matter because you didn't factor that in. It would have been impossible to do that with 40, or not impossible, not fun. So I ended up taking and boiling each hop for 15 minutes. So boil the water, or get the water to a boil, add the hop in, and then once it had boiled for 15 minutes, we went ahead and moved that hop water that we had created straight into a carboy with about 12 ounces of honey. Our total volume was roughly around a little over half a gallon, I would say. So you're seeing some example footage. This was a very long day of boiling hops. Luckily, because I had 4 of those pots, I was able to get a lot done, but essentially I did the same process. Boil water, throw the hops in, 15 minutes, pull them off, put them into a carboy with the honey, mix it in, and that was it. I did that 40 times. So very long day for that. Once we'd finished all that, of course, this was hot liquid. which meant that it was not great for us to pitch our yeast. I use the Safale USO5 because it's a pretty good yeast generally for mead making and beer making and stuff like that too. So we used I think it was about a half a gram or 1 gram per half gallon. The starting gravity for all of these, because I'd weighed out my honey, and that's the sugar component here, was about 1.046 for each one of these. So once we're done with fermentation, these will finish out at 1.000. We will see this brew be roughly about 5.5 to 6%, somewhere in that range. I'll correct myself on screen if I'm wrong. So we'd done all that, we got all of our hops boiled, we let it all cool in all those containers, and then we went ahead and pitched our yeast. We added 2 grams of Fermaid O to give some yeast nutrient to each one up front alongside our yeast, and we let them ferment. The beginning hop boiling added the alpha acids, or the bittering charge, to this brew. Later on, we're gonna add the dry hop, which will hopefully get all of these flavor profiles from each hop itself. The fermentation side of this was about 2 weeks, I will say. And they fermented pretty quick. They're all rocking along, doing their thing. Because this is lower ABV, it moved faster. I noticed that they all started to sort of clear up, not super well, but the fermentation had slowed. I took some more gravity readings to double check, and after 2 weeks, I was pretty certain they were all done. So 2 weeks went along, and what I did was I kept them all in the same container because I didn't want to rack each one over. It just would have taken forever. So after all of that fermentation time, we went ahead and dry hopped these. So I took my hops out again for each one, and we went ahead and added about 4 grams, which is roughly about the same amount as we did before, close to 1/8 of an ounce, maybe a little bit more, for a dry hop of each one of these. We literally just put them straight into each container so they could sit, and we let them dry hop in this way for about 3 days. It was about that time, about 72 hours. Now that moved pretty quick. You're thinking, wow, that's not very long, but the dry hopping does a lot very quickly. So we dry hopped them. We made sure that we didn't add a bunch of oxygen in this process, because oxygen in hops equals bad. So we were very careful to add our hops in, let them sit for 3 days apiece. At that point, I went through the process of bottle conditioning them. Now, specifically, we are can conditioning these, and we'll talk about that in a second, but we need to keep the yeast alive. So I had some friends come over and help me. So special shout out to Nate and Preston for helping me with the bottling side of this, because it was kind of a pain. The process was I took each one of those containers, I racked it into a bucket that had priming sugar, and that had about 2 ounces of erythritol. Now, erythritol, if you don't know what it is a non-fermentable sugar that adds a little bit of sweetness to this. The priming sugar was just, I think, dextrose or something like that, something that is consumable by the yeast. We added that into a bucket, we racked the mead into there, we mixed it up without trying to add a ton of oxygen, and then we went ahead and I put them into cans. So you can carbonate the same way you bottle carbonate, by putting your thing into a container, a can, and then you seal it. So I happen to do a lot of canning, so it worked out for me. You could do this with bottles, of course. So we did that for each one of those. All 40 of those meads got 2 ounces of erythritol and a dose of priming sugar to allow them to bottle carbonate, or can carbonate in this case. And as you see, based on this photo, we have ourselves a huge amount of cans of these meads. Each one, I got about 4 cans from each one. I did not take a final gravity reading after the erythritol, and so that's my own fault, but these are gonna be slightly sweet, I would say off dry, more than likely. The bottle carbonation took about, or can carbonation took about 2 weeks, but I let them set for a long time because the whole purpose of this was to do this video, but also to give an educational component for Mead Stampede 2024, which happened earlier this year, or last year, depending on when you're watching this. I let those set for a long time. They aged for probably 2 or 3 months, and then I opened up some cans, 1 box of my cans at Mead Stampede. I got them all cold, they had all can carbonated, and we did a big tasting experience. What I had people do to give me some feedback on this, because I wanted to just get some scores, generally speaking, was I created a bingo looking card, a sort of thing, wasn't really bingo, but it was a card that had all the information about each hop. You'll see it on screen. And each person got that card and they would give a score as they tasted each mead out of 50. That's just a general number for us. They could also do it online on their phone, so I had a way for them to do it that way. I collected a bunch of scores for each mead at Mead Stampede, which was that first one I talked about. I sent a box to my buddy Kyle, and he opened some for his homebrew club, and so he gave me some data. I sent some to the Clawhammer supply crew, so they could give me some data as well. And then my final box, because I had 4 boxes of these meads, I opened up here in Oklahoma City at an event, just as a kind of like a homebrew club meeting, and had some data collected from that. So I burned through all of the cans of it within about 6 months and collected a bunch of data using those cards and information. People would generally just like look at the card and decide what they wanted to try. Now, one little issue that I found with this was I didn't really think about it when I did this. 40 meads is a lot to drink in one setting. So my hope was when people went in that they would taste hopefully 6 or 7. You'll notice if you look at the data, not everybody tasted every mead, because someone tasting 40 hopped meads was just not gonna happen. So that's just a little disclaimer there. I probably could have done this better and specifically had people taste each one, but I wanted to open this up for people to try their favorite hop in a mead. And I didn't wanna limit people and say, no, you can't try that. So that's what's happening there. So now you've been waiting for this, you saw the whole process. Let's talk about the actual data. As I referenced in the beginning, this was intended to be a best hop for mead making, but in truth, one of the largest factors of this whole experiment was the honey. I used mango honey, which had some fruity elements to it. A fruity honey like that might have a different pairing that might go best with hops. You get a honey that's a darker profile, you might want a different profile of hops. So unfortunately, there's not a best hop ever here, but there's some interesting data to look at. I had my buddy Larry and Jage help me to figure out how to aggregate all of this data, so you're gonna see it in a couple different forms. I'm gonna show you the simplest one right here. We did this in a few ways. They did this with, of course, mean, median, and mode. And then we did some standard deviations. We did some trimmed mean in order to try and pull away some of the highs and lows scores. So you're gonna see on here the simple data, as bare bones, a score with a trimmed mean of 20%, and then a mean plus standard deviation score. Some people don't care about this, and I'll just be honest, I'm gonna talk about my experience with this in a second, and some of my favorites and all that stuff, but here's the data you wanna see, maybe. At the top of each one, they're different. The score with the trimmed mean at 20% had these as the top 10, which is seems about right. I did include how many tasters for each one, so you'll see that I tried to factor that in. Obviously, if anything didn't receive above, like, I would say 8, probably, those are my lowest, 8 tasters, then I wasn't gonna include it, and so I had a couple that had 8 tasters. The top few here, Matuka, Amarillo, German I can't ever say it, Melon Hops, Simcoe, Galaxy, Elixir, Southern Passion, East Kent Golding, Bravo, and Crystal. And then on the standard deviation, mean plus standard deviation, we had Amarillo, which is a common one there. German Hallertau Mittelfrüh, Simcoe, Apollo, Matuka, Wataku, Brew One, Spalt, Northern Brewer, and German Huel Melon. So a couple of those were crossovers, meaning that on both sides, but there were some outliers there that didn't all score super well. So those are that's the simplified version of this, and then they also did this in this chart form. I'll link to it below. It's very cool. You can watch all of the mean, median, mode scores and the standard deviation and the mean plus standard deviation. Their trimmed means, all those things. If you're a statistics person, you'll be interested to see that. So special thanks to Larry and JJ for helping me with that tasting aggregation of notes. Let's talk about the overall experience of this real fast. This was super fun. Will you benefit from doing 40 hops in mead? Probably not. I mean, it was a lot to do. And I don't know that I got to taste through every one of them, I don't remember exactly, so I didn't quite get that. Also, it's just a lot to do in one point, so there's no expectation that you would ever do this. But I do hope that you'll experiment with hopped mead in general. This was a super simple experiment at bare bones. Grab some hops, boil in some water. Generally, if you have a hop that's going to be higher IBUs, if you want it to be more bitter, then that's fine to use a standard amount of hops. But if you want something that's lighter, maybe less hops. Like I said, I did not factor the alpha acid component into all of this. So they were not all the same alpha acids, and I think that's okay. I understand someone's not gonna be happy with me, but that's all right. You should definitely try to experiment with some of this, some hops in general. You might have even more interesting hops around you, but this is the data I've collected. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I've learned a lot about how to pair some hops with honey now. The honey is the big element here. Of course, we're making mead, so we want honey to be the shining star, so to speak, in this thing. This video was not cheap to produce. This is, like I said, the world's biggest hopped mead experiment, and I challenge somebody to do more, someone to do 40 plus hops. Feel free to do so and make a video on it. I'd be curious to see your results as well, but this is the biggest one in the world. Not a cheap video. 40 hops, each one was roughly about somewhere between $3 and $5 for an ounce, I wanna say. So, plus the honey I bought, plus all the cans I used, and the time. This video probably cost me about, glass carboys, I mean, so much stuff. $400, that's about an estimate. $400 for me to produce this video, and I can guarantee you, it's not gonna get more than 20 bucks coming back from it. So if you would like to support the channel for me to be able to do these big hopped meads, fruited meads, all these things that are going to be experiments to help grow this mead encyclopedia, feel free to check out my Patreon or my YouTube member page. You can support me that way. That's an easy way to do it. YouTube is not going to be paying out very much for this. And if I remember to do it, maybe every once in a while, you might see a pinned comment that says how much money this video is actually accrued. And it's gonna be probably pretty sad to see. So check out for a pinned comment to see every once in a while an updated thing, if I remember to do it. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm gonna go ahead and show you some information about each hop, and it'll just scroll through. You can pause and look at them as you want, but you can also look it up online as you find the information. I did give a lot of the information here as well. So huge thank you to all of my people who did the tastings. I'll put all of the names that I could possibly find that have been reported for me. So if you are one of these people, thank you for tasting these meads and being a part of this. I appreciate you and the time you invested and your palate, because that's also a big one too. Next year for Mead Stampede 2025, I've already started and finished my test for it. I am testing primary versus secondary fruit introduction for 15 different fruits. So I chose 15 different fruits, and then I bought 3 pounds of each one. I put fruit in the primary of one mead and fruit in the secondary, and we back sweeten slightly, and those meads will be available for tasting at Mead Stampede 2025. So if you're interested in tasting that and having a similar experience, we get to try something new, feel free to come to Mead Stampede 2025. That will be the educational component. On another note, like I said, this video is about $400. That video I'm producing is probably about $600 to $700. So I will not see anywhere near that amount. So your support on Patreon and the YouTube membership side is super helpful. Hope you enjoy looking at all these hops. Please hit like and subscribe if you're interested for more content, and I hope you'll come back to this big mead encyclopedia that I'm hoping to create. So with that, I don't have anything to drink. I haven't drank anything. Cheers.